Do I advocate against free birth? This is a question that I have been asked time and time again. And it's a question that I have sat with since the passing of my son almost a year ago. I haven't wanted to answer it, if I'm being completely honest, because lately I don't feel like I know anything. And that's been one of the teachings I have received. That's been one of the biggest lessons I've learned, is that no one really knows anything. And nothing is completely black and white. And so as I've sat with this question of if I'm against free birth, what my thoughts on free birth were, because it didn't work for me and it wasn't safe for me, does that mean it's a bad choice for everyone? I've sat with the nuances of this question and really decided to dig deep. So if you're curious about my thoughts around free birth, I'm going to have tea ceremony. And I would love for you to join me. And I'm curious to know your thoughts. So without further ado, let's get into it. The tea I'm drinking is Imperial Grade Laoshan green tea from Shandong. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And I'm sitting by the fire with some beautiful red roses gifted by a dear friend to me and my partner on Valentine's Day, 2025. And I'm here to talk about free birth. Do I feel it's safe? Do I advocate against it? Am I still supportive of it? These are all very important questions. And in this recording, you will not hear my birth story, although you will hear bits and pieces of it. I do plan on sharing my birth story in wholeness, in totality. However, at this time, I'm still undecided of how I want to share that, and the formatting of how I want to share that. I've got some ideas, but I don't know exactly yet. So for the purposes of this recording, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts, what I've learned, and this is by no means a statement or statements of absolute truth. These are ponderings and musings and things that I've come to understand and realize, and perspectives that I've gained over the last year. If you have any thoughts, if you have anything that you want to share, any ideas, any perspectives that you feel would be valuable, any questions that you might have, I encourage you to write in the comments, to ask these questions, because I do feel that conversation is the way forward. And of course, in the format of a podcast or a recording like this, there isn't really a conversation. It's just me speaking to you. But we can make it a conversation. We can bring forward the energy of dialogue in the comment section. I'm hoping to bring people on here and have discussions around free birth and death, and sharing our stories or just what we've learned through our lives, the medicine that women carry, and the sacred mysteries that we are so inundated with and live amongst, but don't necessarily make time for. I've noticed that we as humans are so fixated on black and white, question answer, yes and no, and having things be the one truth, the only truth. And that's just not the way things are. Something that is safe for one person is not safe for another person. And I share this to offer a foundation of where I'm coming from when it comes to free birth. I have many friends, many sisters who have walked the path of free birth, and things went really, really well. Things were very successful, and their baby and their body and their birth was very healthy. I know women who have lost children. They did all the hospital things. My brother, I lost him. He was stillborn as well. I was 10 years old, and he was born in hospital, planned hospital birth, all the things, and he still passed away. And I know many women who've experienced that as well. And so my lens has not been, is not, and I can't imagine will ever be a black and white lens of this is the only way. You know, birthing in a hospital is the only way to have a healthy birth, or free birthing is never safe, or free birthing is always safe. I'm not a black and white individual, and my journey lately has been really attempting my best and failing sometimes, but really doing my best to walk the middle road. And funny enough, I live on the middle road right now. That is the name of the street, the road that I live on. But that has been an anchoring point for me, is walking the middle road, is not deciding anything and actively choosing to not have an opinion. Again, I'm human, and so I have opinions, some of which I'll be sharing with you today. But I do want to preface everything that I'm about to share that I'm not judging anyone for any of their birth choices. I do believe that women, families get to be the deciders of how they want to birth. However, I don't feel that there is whole, proper birth education. We have medicalized birthing, hospital birthing, medical midwifery even, that pushes a specific way of birthing. And I can see why they do that. I can see that there is a desire to eliminate risk. And I hold in my heart a belief at this time that they are doing so because they care, because they want the best possible outcomes for mothers and babies. However, that doesn't always happen. There are many, many stories of women leaving medicalized birthing experiences, feeling abused and assaulted and raped and having very negative outcomes, because a living mother and a living baby isn't the only positive outcome that we as a culture need to strive for. There are many ways to have a positive birth experience, and that doesn't just involve a healthy mom and a healthy baby. And of course, that does need to be priority in a lot of cases, you know, when possible, and sometimes it's not possible. And I can't decide what is possible for someone and what is not. So, if you don't already have some tea with you, you can make some tea, pause this recording. I have my tea in front of me, I have my roses, and whenever you're ready, we can continue on with the conversation. So, the question is, do you advocate against free birth because your son passed away in a free birthing scenario? Now, as I said before, I'm not going to go into too many details about my whole birth story, but I will share that my partner and I planned on having a free birth. We had initially contacted every local midwife we could find in the area that were, you know, independently functioning, but still within still under the healthcare umbrella. And then we contacted a midwifery collective that's local, that's the only midwifery collective here, and we felt uncomfortable with some of the things that they said, and we made our decision to free birth out of a place of like mistrusting the medical system and fear of the medical system, and wanting to create space between us and the medical world. And I know that there's a lot of people that relate to that feel the same way, and there's a lot of people that don't. And again, I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, but for our own experiences previous to the birth and death of our son, that is where we were coming from. We were coming from a place of fear and mistrust of the medical system and wanting to do things our own way, because we felt that it was the safest thing for our child. I labored for 3 days at home, 1 day in hospital, and then our son Floyd was born via forceps in hospital, and I was following that, put on life support, and I was in a coma for 2 days, and I'm still dealing with major health complications. I'm awaiting an upcoming surgery. I just had surgery a few months ago because of the physical damage that my body received from the birthing process. And I'm still navigating that, and I'm not sharing openly about that just yet, although I will, because it really feels important. And I have been documenting my journey with that. And this is where I do struggle with the world of free birth for many reasons, one of which is that there is a claim that, birth is natural and babies always come. And even when I was in the birthing portal, when I was laboring, we had messaged a few different people, and that was something that was said to us. We had heard it before I went into labor. We heard it while I was in labor. Babies always come. Don't worry. Give it time. Babies always come. And this is true and inaccurate as well. It is true that babies always come, but our baby got stuck in my birth canal, and he needed help to be born. And so he did come with support. And so there are so many nuances, and the language that we use and the phrasing that we use when it comes to birth, especially the natural birthing world, can be as harmful, equally so, as the fear-mongering that I've seen in the medical system. Now, I've been deeply intertwined and deeply engaged with the medical system, with OBGYNs and nurses and surgeons since the passing of my son. And prior to this experience, I was feeling so resistant to the medical world. And was I respectful? Yes, but I was also, I didn't have to engage. I didn't require medical help, the 30 years of my life beforehand. And now I'm finding myself in a position where I am heavily reliant on the medical system in a way that I just have never experienced before. And I bow my head in the deepest, most humble respect and reverence to the medical system, because I've never been treated with so much respect and compassion and care. I've never had so many doctors and midwives and nurses and surgeons cry with me and pray with me and hold me and care for me with intimate, heartfelt compassion. And I know that not everybody has that experience. I've spoken to women where they've free birthed or attempted to free birth and wound up in hospital in an emergency transfer situation, and they experienced something totally opposite to what I experienced. And because of that, they are now leaning even farther away from the medical system. And a friend of mine, a dear sister of mine, who birthed a week before I did, twin boys, and she's been my best friend since I was 14. She was 14. And we always said we wanted to have babies at the same time, and we did. Just didn't turn out the way that either of us had thought it would. But we birthed at the same time, give or take a week. And she said something really powerful. She said that, and I want to quote her, but I don't have the quote right in front of me. But she said essentially, to summarize, that we don't need, the medical system is not to be trusted or believed. It's meant to be used when we need it. And this is where I feel that the free birthing world does not speak to the times and the times and scenarios needed to lean into the medical system and medical support. So much so that on a free birthing Instagram account, she had reached out after watching one of the videos that they shared. In the comment section, asked a question, and there was a bit of a back and forth because a woman, her baby passed away. She chose to not receive medical help, and the free birthing Instagram account was very supportive of this. And this friend of mine, there was a back and forth, and she ended up being blocked and her comment deleted from being able to engage. And this is where I struggle with the birthing world, because this is not the first case where something like this has happened in the free birthing world or the medical birthing world. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of incomplete information in the birthing spaces. And part of the reason is that conversation isn't happening. We're not getting people who think differently than us in the same room. We're not getting people who have polar opposite views discussing the nuances of birth. We're just having different people preaching very polarizing things that have some truth in them, but not complete truth. And therein lies the confusion of, how do we choose to birth? Where do we choose to birth? What do I need to be concerned of? What are the risks? And I will be speaking, as I said, about my physical healing journey postpartum, because this is a risk of free birth, what I am living with right now, and the massive, massive difficulties in my physical healing and my physical health are a potential risk of free birth. And it's a risk I was not aware of. And I will be speaking to that, but for the purposes of this, I will not. And I've been speaking a lot, and I still haven't said yes or no to the question at hand, which is, do I advocate against free birth? And to put it simply, no, I don't. I do not advocate against free birth. Do I advocate for free birth? No. Do I advocate for hospital birth? No. Do I advocate for midwifery? No. Maybe that's confusing. And I can see how it would be confusing, because I'm confused. If I don't advocate against free birth and I'm not for the hospital, but I don't advocate against the hospital, what do I advocate for? What am I standing in? What is the purpose of recording this now? And the purpose is to ask more questions. I cannot advocate for any woman to birth in a specific way, because birth is so nuanced. Every single woman, her journey up until she gets pregnant, when she's pregnant, what her birth might look like, what her postpartum might look like, what support she has or doesn't have around her, everything that she's learned, the way that she was born, what she has been taught about birth from her mother and her community, all goes to inform her decision making. I don't feel that birth is cookie cutter, because it can't be. There are too many nuances in us as individual women. There are too many nuances that can occur in birth. And so I don't advocate for birth one way or another. And I feel that when people do advocate for birthing in a specific kind of way, that is actually doing a disservice to everybody. Every single person on this planet, that does a disservice. Because how can we advocate for birthing in a specific way when there are so many subtle, nuanced details that go into shaping what birth could be? For the most part, though, I will say that birthing with support is likely the better option, solely because birth is a very primal experience, right? When we are birthing, we are going into our old brain. We are shutting off the part of our brain that can make logical decisions. For me, when I was birthing, I started, seeing things. It was very psychedelic. I was vomiting a lot. Like, I was very primal. And a birthing woman experiences any distraction as a threat. Anybody coming in, it's a threat. And she's doing exactly what her body is designed to do. She is protecting her young. She is keeping her birth space safe. She's like growling, and you can't see me right now, but my shoulders went up, my hands turned into claws, and I feel like I just want to crawl around the floor. Like, birth is primal in that way. It's very animalistic. And having someone there who can monitor, and not necessarily with all the fetal monitoring, everything, all the doodads and whatsits and beeping machines, but just to watch, to say, she's making good sounds, and okay, yep, we're taking note of how long the contractions are, and she's eating, she's peeing, her color is looking good. Just watching from a distance, not necessarily invading the space, but allowing mom to be in the primal space so that the observer and the other space holder, the proper midwife, whoever it is, the birth attendant, can do the analytical side of birth, can watch, can notice, hey, is this turning into an emergency situation? Because birth is not always an emergency scenario, but things happen quickly. Emergency situations in birth can happen so fast, and it can be difficult to know when birth is an emergency and when it's not, because birth is intense. And I ended up having a very bad infection, a super rare infection that the doctors had only ever seen a couple of times in Africa. And it still shocks me. I had 2 different bacteria in my blood. One was very common, E. coli, and one was something called strep G, which, again, not common at all. I don't know how I received that. I have never been to Africa, and so it was really bizarre for the surgeons, doctors in the ICU to even come into contact with that again. They were like, what is going on? And they had to try all these different antibiotics, and I was in hospital for about 2 weeks after our son's birth. And what I've learned from surgeons and doctors is that there can be overlap with infection, and what can present with infection and what can present with birth. And this overlap takes a very trained eye to be able to see, ooh, is this infection? is this birth, right? Because there are very many things that can present in a normal birthing scenario that can also present an infection. And the differences can be very obvious, but they can also be very subtle. And that's where we can say, and I've heard a lot of free birthing circles say, like, just trust your body and you'll know if something's going on. But if you're experiencing delirium and you're not in the right mind, which I wasn't, that's what was going on. My sodium levels were really low. I was in a deep state of delirium. I was slurring my words. I was not able to make coherent decisions when I got to hospital. It was really concerning. And when free birthing circles make statements like, as the mother, you will know if something's going on, that is not always true. That is not always the case. And that is where these blanket statements become a disservice, because yes, a lot of the time moms will know. But what happens if there's infection and you don't know what's going on, and then you're alone and you don't have anybody supporting you? So my foundation here is, I'm not an advocate against free birth, but I don't think that it's the safest thing. I don't think it's the smartest thing. And I'm also going to get into the history of birth, and there's another big piece here that I want to mention. But I do, if a woman does feel that she wants to free birth, checking in with why do you want a free birth, and really asking questions to people in your community that could be of service to you. Speaking with the OBs in your community and the midwives and all of the birth providers, so if you need to call upon people, that you can, that there are people available that want to support you, that you can call upon. So making all of these backup plans, I think, is very important as well. Because I was on the brink of death. My organs were shutting down. My kidneys and liver had shut down. My blood, I was completely septic. Like, I had acute sepsis, and I was dying. And if somebody was present, maybe we would have been able to catch that sooner, and also perhaps not. We don't know. I've spoken to a few midwives, and there's a lot of unknowns. So when it comes to birthing, and free birthing in particular, one of the statements that I would hear a lot when I was pregnant was, and even beforehand, we're mammals, we're made to birth, our bodies are made to birth. And you didn't see that. I shrugged my shoulders and tilted my head in sort of a questioning, sort of expression, if that made any sense to you. Because here's the thing. We birth how we live. And this is another statement that I've heard in home birthing, free birthing circles, in books, courses. And I do agree with that. But here's the nuanced piece. Here's this aspect that needs to be spoken about. Humans birth, mammals birth, how we live. And if we look at cougars and bears as two examples, they birth how they live. And they live solitary lives. They are mammals that are independent and autonomous from other animals of their same species. There are not packs of bears that live together. Packs of cougars, that's not how they live. And so it makes sense that they birth on their own. But if we watch animals that live in community, dolphins, wolves, and we notice how they birth, a lot of times, even wild horses, a lot of the time there are other horses, other wolves other dolphins that are standing by, that are watching, that are holding that space, because they are pack animals. They live in community. And human beings live in community. And so there's a statement that's been going around the free birthing world that says women have been birthing since the dawn of time. And that is true. Birth is natural. Sure. Death is also natural. And as long as women have been dying in child, or as long as women have been birthing children in the world, women and children have also been dying in birth. And that is the complete statement, right? Birth is natural, and so is death. Babies getting stuck is natural. How can I say that? Because in nature, babies get stuck. You know, in nature, babies die. Mothers die. We see this with trees, saplings that get trampled by the snow. It's common. And just because we are beings of nature, does that mean that we shouldn't reach out for medical support if we need it? These are questions that, you know, I'm posing to you. I want to know your thoughts and feelings about this, because these are really important subtleties, you know, that I haven't seen be talked about. I've heard, again, in free birthing circles, say that women have been birthing alone since women have been birthing. And that might be the case in some scenarios where women have birthed on their own. But for the most part, if a person was on their own in, you know, prehistoric times and, you know, caveman days and all throughout human history, if a person was on their own, a lot of the time it's because they were exiled or left for dead. It wasn't because they were living healthful lives. Humans are communal beings, period. We live in community, we work in community, we get married in community. Even when people die, we honor death in community. Everything that humans do is in community. And yes, there's time to be on our own, and there are specific, you know, moments and experiences that we need to be solo or autonomous, solitary for. But birth is not one of them. I can't sit here and say that birth is one of them. And I'm not saying birth in town square in front of everybody or film your birth. I'm not saying any of that. What I am saying is, from the deepest place of humility, my heart to the earth, I have been sitting with the question, is free birth the most conductive way a woman can birth to bring a positive outcome? And I don't just mean a living mother and a living baby. I mean, when a woman births a baby, does she have somebody there to make sure that dad is okay, that the spouse is held, that, hey, you just birthed your baby, what can I get you? Here's some soup, here's some water. Like, is it the safest, most, conducive way for a woman to give birth for the most positive outcome? And I cannot say yes. I equally cannot say no. That's not true. I retract that. I cannot say yes, as well I cannot say no. It is not equally so, because I do think that free birth can be a positive option. But 90% of the time, I would say it is a very good idea to have somebody present. It is a very, very good idea to have someone present. You want to make sure you're choosing the right person. And then this is where another subtlety, another layer comes in. Because birthing with somebody present is you're welcoming in someone into the birth space. It's a very difficult, place to be. It's a very difficult situation, because you want to have somebody that's going to be respectful, and you want somebody that is aligned with, a positive outcome and supporting your birth wishes, and also knows what to look for and can hold space in the way that you need space to be held. And we don't want to lean necessarily the complete other way and just hire any midwife or any OBGYN or any doctor to hold that space if that's not what we feel is in the best interest of our baby. And this is where I felt stuck, because I didn't feel like I had options. And I've reflected deeply on birthing and how birthing used to happen in community, because birth and birth keepers used to be not just an integral and a needed pillar in our community, but they were interwoven. We knew very likely the women that helped us be born, that supported our mothers in birth, and potentially our grandmothers or our sisters. Like, birth was something that we had seen and were connected to and witnessed, and we had trust already built with midwives. We had trust already built with birth keepers. We knew them. We've known them for a long time. And now we're living in a world where a woman gets pregnant, and it's only throughout her gestational period, her pregnancy, and not even very much in the early days. It's only, you start seeing your midwife and your doctor and your OB like more frequently later down the line, that you bring in a birth keeper into your world, that you're integrated and connected with people who are serving birthing women and birth. And we're expected to place our trust in strangers, pretty much. We are expected to place our trust and the lives of our children and ourselves in the hands of people that we don't know, when that is not the function of birth. That is not how we can birth in the most optimal way. Trust and safety in a relationship, which can only be created and cultivated and built over time, can't happen in 9 months. And when you get pregnant, 9 months, time gets kind of wonky, because on one hand you're like, oh my God, it's taking so long, I just want to meet my baby. And on the other hand, you're like, where'd the time go? It happened so fast. You're not given enough time to really get to know someone, let alone somebody who's going to be present for the most intimate, earth-shattering, groundbreaking time in your life, where you're either becoming a new mom or you're a new mom to this baby. You're completely open and dilated and bringing a human into the world. It's a very intimate experience, to say the very least. The very least, it is such an intimate time, not just for mom and baby, but for dad and for the community. Birth is a community affair. It affects everyone in the community. And I really saw that after our son passed away, how many people it touched. I saw that when my brother passed away, how many people that touched. It reached its threads out to every single person, tears shed, heartbreak, gut-wrenching experiences, feelings throughout the entire community. Anytime a child passes away, we will see that. But anytime a child is born, we will also see that. And we live in a world right now that's very individualized, removed, non-communal, and that doesn't serve women or babies or birth or families or communities. It's not serving anyone. And this is where conversation becomes such a pillar, and conversations aren't happening. And I was planning on creating a circle where I was, bringing in OBGYNs and midwives and nurses, like L&D nurses, and birth keepers outside the system, and women who have free birthed, and bringing everybody together in one room to talk to each other. And unfortunately, the woman who was helping me organize this, who was a co-founder of the midwifery collective locally in town, decided to just not respond to my messages. Still hasn't, so it's been about 5 months now, almost, since I've heard back. We had a place rented and everything, and I have kept quiet about that because I didn't want to create an even bigger divide. And I see the need for transparency, and this is one of the reasons that there is a lot of mistrust with medical midwives and the medical world and the medical system, because there is no conversation, there is no communication, and there doesn't seem to be respect. There seems to be, I am a doctor and you are a patient, you need to respect me, and that's not a way to create a safe birthing experience. And I will add an addendum to that by just saying that has not been my experience with the doctors and midwives and nurses and surgeons that I've worked with. I have been treated with the deepest respect. This scenario has really opened my eyes, and it's not the first time that this particular midwifery collective has done something like this. And I don't know why. There has been no communication, and the conversation never ended up happening. And I chose to not share about that transparently because I didn't want to make them look bad. I didn't want to create even more of a divide. But this is one of the issues. Because when we can get together in a room, when we can have transparent, real conversations, face to face, person to person, even online, if we're discussing things that we disagree with somebody that we disagree with, rather, we're able to gain clarity. We're able to build trust. And a big pillar of creating trust is in showing up in conversation, in dialogue, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when there's fear, especially when we disagree, especially when we disagree. And so that hasn't happened. And I see that as, a micro example of the macro issue where there isn't all-encompassing conversations happening between, medical birthing professionals, birth keepers outside the system, and mothers, women who are the ones that are birthing. We're not having those conversations. Instead, we are having conversations behind closed doors. We're having conversations in circles with people that agree with us. And then there's no point in even having conversations because we're just experiencing an echo chamber. We're in a cave. We're hearing echoes of what we just said come back to us, but we're not growing. We're not learning. We're not evolving. And that becomes an issue. And what I have experienced walking with the medical system after being so distrustful and fearful of the system and now being flung right into it, I've been having insightful and profound conversations with doctors where I bring up concerns that I have about whatever it might be at topics related to birth, like all topics related to birth, whether it's a nuchal cord or ultrasounds or, gestational time of due dates, like all of these things that feel a bit controversial. The conversations that I've had with doctors behind closed doors have been amazing and moving. And I've left them wishing that I had recorded them, and then going back into another meeting with them saying, why didn't we record that? That was really powerful. That was really amazing, because we were discussing things with different viewpoints, and we were respectful and kind and compassionate, and we both had a desire to understand the other person. And that's all I've wanted. And I have not seen that in the medical system, in the medical world. And so when I say, I don't want to stray too much from the initial question of do you advocate against free birth? So I really want to come back to that. When I say that I do not advocate against free birth, I mean that I can't advocate against free birth, because I've seen it work very beautifully. I've seen women have very beautiful experiences, and I can't logically and realistically, not even as a sister or a woman, regardless of my beliefs, I can't go to her and say, oh, your experience was wrong and bad and unsafe, and you shouldn't have done that, even though it turned out really well, because a lot of the time, many medical professionals in the birth world and birth keepers have shared, you're birth a lot of the time works, it is safe a lot of the time. It is also unsafe sometimes. And the times that it's unsafe, it becomes unsafe really fast, and it becomes unsafe because of a specific set of circumstances, and that's also why one of the doctors, when I asked her, I was like, why did he die? And she was like, well, you were all of these things, she was like, it was the perfect storm. And she said, I shared a Substack on this. She said, you were 42 weeks gestation. He was posterior. You had an infection, and he was stuck in the birth canal. And I've spoken to midwives, and they're like, well, just because you were 42 weeks, there's women that birth at 45 weeks or 36 weeks. So that's not even a determining factor necessarily. It can influence, but it's not a determining factor. You had sepsis, you had an infection. Okay. Many women get sepsis and have infections. Mine just happened to spread. Your labor was long. That was another reason that she had said, there's a lot of women that have really long labors. He was posterior. A lot of babies are posterior, not the majority. I think I checked the statistics, and I think 2 or 6% or something like that, which is big enough. It's a lot of babies, but it's not the majority by a long shot are born or in a posterior position. I know babies that have been posterior and they were born without the help of forceps and all of these things. But this is where black and white statements become very dangerous. And this is something that I learned in one of the free birthing courses that I took, where they said, nuchal cords are safe. And a nuchal cord is a baby with the cord wrapped around their neck. There are different ways that a nuchal cord can present. Sometimes there's a knot. Sometimes the nuchal cord is around the neck and around the body, constricting blood flow. I had the cord wrapped around my neck, I think, twice, and it was rather tight. It wasn't choking, but it was around my neck. I am here. I'm alive. I am fine. So I had heard in this free birthing course, I had learned and paid for this course, which I can, even just saying that, I can feel maybe a little bit of, resentment or upset at that, because the information I received was not complete and not accurate. But they had stated that a nuchal cord is in the realm of normal in birth, and it's not concerning. And I spoke to, over the last year, I've spoken to many doctors and midwives and L&D nurses and, birth keepers outside the system and all these things. And what I've learned is that it's not the thing that is safe or unsafe in birth. It is the circumstances in which the thing presents that makes something safe or unsafe. So it's not to say that a nuchal cord is always dangerous. It can be dangerous depending on the circumstances. It's not to say that a long labor is bad or unsafe. It is the circumstances in which a long labor presents. And we can say that for every single thing in birth. Every single thing in birth. Because for one story of a woman who had a terrible experience free birthing, you will find 10 other women who had great experiences. For one woman who wound up on life support, birthing in a hospital, you have 10 other women who didn't. Like, you can find information to support your beliefs all around when it comes to birth. And that is doing a disservice to ourselves, to other people, instead of understanding birth and looking at birth as a whole, like really holistically. And when I say holistically, that does not mean naturally. That does not mean holistic and natural and earth-based and breathy, and it doesn't mean any of that. It means holistic, to view something from a whole lens, a whole perspective, all angles, understanding all the different working pieces, subtleties, nuances, aspects of something, in this case, birth. And so to say that free birthing is always dangerous is not good. I can't say that because I've seen it work beautifully. I've seen it work not beautifully. I've seen hospital births go amazing and have women walking away feeling so, so great. And then I've seen women who've had terrible experiences. And I will also add that when I say I've seen, I will say that I've witnessed, I'm just going to rephrase that, I have witnessed the stories of these women walking away from these experiences. I have not been present for those circumstances that I'm speaking about. I have witnessed these stories as told by the mother who had experienced them. I just went on for a little bit there. Just talked and talked. Which I guess is why you're tuning in. You're here to listen to me talk. And it's very difficult for me to have a blanket statement about birth, because any blanket statement I've heard about birth, I've learned the contrary, and I've just seen how incomplete, I was going to say incorrect, but it is incomplete. One woman's experience with free birth does not negate another woman's experience with free birth. I do not feel that free birth is the way and the only way. I don't feel that it's actually the most optimal way for a woman to birth. I can't say that it is, because, as I said, we are communal beings at our core, and birth is a communal event. Not that we need to have 30 people in the room while we're birthing, but support is important. And support including postpartum, and we don't have enough of that in North America. I certainly didn't receive a whole lot. I can't even say that, because I did. I received a lot of support from some dear sisters and from the community, and then I also received, hate mail from people that I thought I trusted. And in particular, one woman was very, there were a few women actually that were cruel. The woman that I'm speaking about, she's a therapist, And she had some things that were very unkind to say to me about me. And the birth that she knew nothing about. She had very strong opinions. And I'm sharing this because this is also very rooted in the topic of this. It's tied in. And this particular woman had very strong judgmental opinions. And when we don't have enough information, we cast judgments. And everything that we've experienced prior to, the way that we were raised and our preconceived ideas of who someone is or what a situation is, we will cast judgments. We will assume things. It is human nature to do so. And her viewpoint was just a very judgmental viewpoint on the birth and us, and she just didn't understand us or our choice to free birth. And initially I was really upset and angry and had a really hard time dealing with that because we lived so closely together in community. And I see the humanness in that experience. And recently, as a therapist, one of her clients, and I don't know the details, so I can't share any details, but one of her clients had experienced something negative in birth in the hospital at the hands of the medical staff, the birthing medical staff. I don't know if it was a doctor, a surgeon, midwife, L&D nurse. I don't know. I don't know what happened, if mom and baby are okay, if one of them's okay, one of them's not. I don't know the details. What I do know is that she spoke to my partner and said that she has a lot more empathy and understanding for why we chose what we chose, why we were hesitant with the medical system, why we were mistrustful and fearful. And that was all that was relayed to me. And I share that because in birth, there is so much judgment. I used to judge so much. I would judge so much because I had seen all the documentaries. My mom birthed me at home. Like, I had such an idea of what birth was before this journey. I was like, but birth is natural. It's all of these things, and cesarean rates are so high and they're not necessary most of the time, and this and this and this. Like, I judged, epidurals and everything. I was like, I did. I didn't see it as necessary. I had my own viewpoints on it. And, birth was something that I remember talking about my whole life. And I had such a one-sided perspective on it. But I have compassion for the woman that I was, the girl that I was. And I see her, and I see where she was coming from, Where I am now, I can see things with more of a whole perspective in mind. Not entirely free from judgment. I'm human. I think it's natural to carry judgments or to be discerning or to have viewpoints and beliefs and perspectives and all of these things, and not judgments from like a critical or cruel place, but just judgments on like, we make judgment calls of it's cold outside, I'm going to wear a jacket, it's sunny outside, I'm going to put on a hat. Like we make judgment calls every single day with what we're wearing, where we're going, what we're doing, how we're having conversations. We're all, and so when I say judgment, that really is the way that I'm using that word. And so I understand a lot of where I was coming from, and now I can see with more humility and more understanding and more truth, just as this woman can, because before she was judging very harshly based on whatever ideas that she had about what happened, what didn't happen, about me, And through witnessing another story, she was able to open her eyes and gain deeper understanding and see things from a different perspective. And I think that's really what I've come to about birth and thinking about birth and reflecting on birth is it's not black and white, and I am not the person to claim to have any answers. Not a one. I'm not your woman if you want answers. I am just a woman on a mission to bring people together, to have conversation. I'm just a woman with questions and a story. And part of my health now, my physical health, is that birth is kind of taken out of my hands. I do want to have children in the future. And because of the surgeries that I've had, it will likely be very unsafe to birth vaginally again. And so my option would be cesarean. And I've had to come to terms with that. And I'm not sure how much I believe that, but I do know that any future pregnancies, I will be receiving support, asking for support, and before that time comes, I'm going to be doing a lot of scar tissue healing and a lot of pelvic floor healing, and I do believe that miracles could happen, that miracles could exist, and that things totally out of the realm of possibility or reality can happen. So I'm not pushing the idea away of vaginal birth, just because many doctors have said that wouldn't be possible for me. But I have come to terms with it, and I've come to realize as well that it's not what we do that makes something sacred or holy or special or any fill in the blank with any word that you want, beautiful. It's the spirit in which we do it. And I feel that, I think that every woman wants to have a special birth, a healthy birth, for her baby, giving her baby the best chance at life and in a good way, and giving her child like, hey, I want you to come into the world in the best way that I can imagine for you. What mother doesn't think that? And think that there's many ways for that to happen. And there's one quote that I can remember writing all over my notebooks in high school, discussing with my best friend over and over again. And even now, we talk about it. And the quote is, "I would rather have my mind open by wonder than one closed by belief." And in every area, every side of the spectrum of birth, whether it's free birth or home birth or hospital birth, I don't see open minds. I see closed minds. I see minds closed because of a set of belief systems that are carried, instead of wonder available and potential. When we are open to different viewpoints, and if we're open to being wrong, if we're open to changing course, if we're open to things being different than what we thought, I think that is setting ourselves up for the best possible outcome, whatever that might be, however that might look. Because if we're only speaking with people that we agree with, and we're only reading books that affirm our belief systems, we are staying closed. So even though we're learning new information and gaining more knowledge, we're actually keeping ourselves shut off and closed. As opposed to opening our minds and reading books from different perspectives that maybe counter each other and discredit one another even. So those are my thoughts for now. I'll probably revisit this in a little bit. But for now, what I'll leave you with is there's no one wholly correct way to birth, not in my eyes. What works for one woman might not work for another, and what doesn't work for one woman might work for the other. Death can happen anywhere, anytime, and under any circumstances, in or out of the birth space. It is a fact of life. It is the great equalizer. It is where we all end up. It is not the evil. And we need to have conversations with people that think differently than us. That is really the only way we're going to make birth safe for babies and mothers and families, while simultaneously honoring just how sacred that birth and portal, really is. And as I've already said, if you have any questions or thoughts, or a story that you want to share, I would love to hear it. I would really encourage you to speak and share in the comments. You can send me a message. You can, reach out and we can have a conversation, record something special together, and offer that to women. So I'm sending you love, and I wish you well. So thanks for being here and having tea ceremony with me, sitting by the fire, being in this space of conversation, pondering, musing. I appreciate your heart and your ears and your mind and your wisdom and your story.